Welcome back, guys, to Within Tolerance Podcast, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Proteum Machining, and this week I'm joined by JT Belknap of DFM Toolworks. So, welcome, JT.
Thanks, Dylan. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on here. And you've made it when you've made it with intolerance.
I appreciate the sentiment. I'm not sure if I agree, but I definitely appreciate it. So let's jump into real quick what is DFM Toolworks? What do you guys do? Where can people find you online so they can go and pull you up on Instagram before we jump into your backstory?
Sure. So Instagram's probably my most active platform. And that's at DFM, D as in dog, F as in Frank, M as in Mary, toolworks.com and at DFM Toolworks on Instagram. So, um, and then what do we do? Currently we are very focused on hand tools and woodworking tools, but the overall mission of this company is to create jobs for people here in the United States. So, long term, I will be in multiple markets, but woodworking is where we are today. And In terms of what we're making mostly layout tools like carpenter squares. And then we're also doing some other hand tools that are a little more niche, such as card scrapers, which are pieces of blue spring steel and then used effectively like sandpaper. Um, but it's really to try to get a fine finish on certain types of wood. Um, and then we make some knives, like marking knives, which again are used for laying out joinery for woodworking. And I won't go through our whole catalog, but again, you can find us on Amazon as well. If you just search DFM tools, it'll pull up a lot of our different products, and we have a brand store on Amazon as well. So, um, and right now it's myself and two other team members, and we're looking to expand, and I can talk about that probably later in the show. But yeah, again, we're sourcing all our products, all our materials from here in the United States, and again, this is just an avenue for me to have my own business as well as create a really good working environment for other people. So that's it.
Well, that's awesome. That's a very admirable reason to have a business. So let's get into how you got to where you are now. I mean, I know your story on your website says that you were an industrial and manufacturing engineer. So how did you start down the road of making stuff?
Yeah. Well, we'll just skip forward to college. So I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do when I got to school, but I did think that I wanted to be a chemical engineer for whatever reason. Now that I look back on it, I have no clue why, but um, I did have an interest in chemistry. But that once I saw what you actually had to do in college for it, I was like, man, this is boring. There's really not a whole lot going on that's like visceral or something you can actually see and touch. Um, so I took two different intro courses, and the one I took first was actually mechanical engineering, and I was lucky to have a really good professor who understood how to engage a bunch of 18 and 19-year olds. So we got to build stuff. Um, we had some competitions, where you build like a rubber band powered machine, and it has to do something. I can't remember exactly what it is. I want to say we were throwing paper airplanes or something. But anyway, and by the way, I also just love cars. So I mean, I've enjoyed listening to you talk to some other car guys on the show here. Being a dad, though, I and working for myself now, I haven't had time for cars since the early 2000s. But
Oh,
back in the
bummer.
day, I had a post college graduation. I bought a used C5 Corvette and took it autocrossing and had a lot of fun in that car until the baby came. But yeah, so back to college, I discovered that I really enjoyed mechanical engineering, and but I also played sports in college. So I played football, and I uh, also threw in track. So I didn't really have time to do SAE. Otherwise, I totally would have done it, but I just didn't. There was no time to do both. Um, and And so as I was getting ready to graduate, I thought I was still going to be more on like the design or go get my master's. Um, I had several professors who wanted me to stay on and help them with research stuff. But by the time I was a senior in college, I was just desperate to get a job and make enough money where I didn't have to like be dependent on anyone else. So I really didn't want to pursue a master's and be broke, continue to be broke. so, um, so yeah, I got lucky in that there was a job fair at my school, and they, there are a lot of companies there, Raytheon, a bunch of defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, um, and a bunch of others that I applied for. But the one that I found most interesting once I actually got an interview was with Toyota Motor Manufacturing. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, yeah. And so what was really exciting about that program, it was a rotational program. So for the first 2 years, you worked in different factories in different functions as part of a engineering and training development program. Um, because Toyota at the time, this is in 2006, was expanding pretty rapidly. They were building several new plants in the United States, and they didn't have enough people in Japan to ship over to try to start all these places. So they were hiring Americans in not only engineering roles, but also management roles faster than they ever had before. So I was in a class of 100 EITs, and uh, yeah, that was an interesting process because the first 3 months we went to school basically again. So we learned the Toyota way, we learned their version of lean manufacturing, and um, I think probably the most memorable and special part of it though is I actually worked on the line in Kentucky for 2 weeks building Camrys. And so
Oh, wow.
yeah, um, that was kind of eye opening only because at the time I was still in really good shape, um, having just come out of playing D3 college football. And I tell you what, I installed several thousand airboxes and shot several thousand battery terminals for 2 weeks straight, and my forearms were just like I felt like I had tendonitis. Uh,
Oh, wow.
I felt like I was gonna, if they kept me around for another week, I was just gonna have to finally, call uncle and be like, all right, I can't do it. Um,
That's
and
crazy.
yeah, and so I was doing the assembly. I was doing some stuff on the assembly line there, and no, not everyone did that. So some people went to chassis, some people went to final inspection, some people went to the paint shop, weld shop. So I just happened to be in the assembly shop, and gained a lot of respect for people that are effectively doing something 400 times a day for years. Now, granted, the reason I hurt so badly is I was fighting things because I wasn't as skilled as these other people at motioning parts into place. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but like, they know how to handle a wire harness without really thinking about it. Whereas I was like feeling like I was under the gun, which I kind of was. Like this wasn't like, oh, let's slow the line down because there are a couple of EITs here. It was like, no, I'm one of like 7,000 people, working at the plant that day. So um, yeah. So anyway, that was really um, helpful because not everyone gets that kind of experience as an engineer, at least initially. And ever since then, I've always made sure that I am participating in all the processes that I implement, even here at my current company. Um, but
I think that's
anyway, so that
super important. Like I don't know many engineers that still get to participate in the process even years down the line. So
yeah, I
that's
think
amazing.
I think so that's kind of the beginning of getting into manufacturing. So I got into manufacturing as soon as I graduated school in 2006. I've been in it the rest of my career effectively. And, while I was at Toyota, I was there for 5 years. After that, 2 years where I did one in casting down in Jackson, Tennessee. Lovely people, but I do not miss casting whatsoever. 100 plus degrees in the summertime. And, just quite honestly, casting is like we like to joke it was the armpit of automotive. So, um, it's as close to raw material as you get, throwing molten material into a die casting machine. And so, yeah, it's, it's nasty business. There's a lot of lubricants and anyway, we won't go into die casting, but I didn't get to choose where I went. So this was kind of a lottery system with 100 people. And, this wasn't even a choice on my radar. But it was a good experience. Had one of the worst managers in Toyota history, I think, because most people don't get fired from Toyota, but this guy managed to get fired several years after I left, and I was not surprised. But
Wow, that's terrible.
yeah, I mean, you want to talk about just a mean guy, smart and mean. So it's like and manipulative. So it it was a it was an interesting experience. We won't relive it here on Within Tolerance, but it was another good experience in just understanding that this is not what work is all about. But as it was my first full time job, I was like, God, this is awful. Um, it was almost like I'll give a brief story because maybe people might find it interesting. But my first day in Jackson, I didn't even meet him because he sent me an email telling me, "Oh, by the way, you're starting on third shift the first week, um, and I'll see you in the morning." So I show up to the plant at like I don't know, probably 7 or 8 o'clock just to talk to somebody from first shift who hung around to get me a badge. And yeah, the first morning after like being sleep deprived, um, he starts battering me with all these questions. And he's like, "Were you even paying attention?" Like, and I'm like, "Dude, it's my first day." And
Wow.
there's like, several hundred people here, all doing different things. And so, um, so yeah, my first week in Jackson, Tennessee was on third shift. And there's nothing wrong with being on third shift, but uh, it wasn't like this red carpet was rolled out for me. Instead, it was more like let's let's screw with the two. Luckily, there's another guy with me, um, who was another EIT, so it wasn't like it was just me. But we
Still,
both
that's rough.
we both found it interesting, um, to say the least. But yeah, I like I said, I liked I really loved the people that worked there overall. The team members were great. The engineers that I worked with under the engineering manager were great. Um, so overall, it's still a really good experience, um, like from a learning perspective. Um, and then went to assembly in Toyota, Texas. Did assembly conveyance for a year. Um, what was really cool about that was I had a great manager who knew a lot. I mean, the guy effectively was the combination of like an engineering manager and a maintenance manager. So like he knew how all the PLCs worked. He knew a lot. And So that was another really good experience where actually I got to create a touchscreen um, application, if you will, so that we could move expedited items throughout the factory from our on-site suppliers. Um, so I got to do a little SQL programming, and I didn't do the final programming, but I was kind of like the QA guy who also was the project manager. But and that was use it or lose it money. That was like random. Hey, we have 100 grand to spend before the end of the year. This was in 2008, right before the crash. So this is back when there was such a thing as use it or lose it money. Um, because working at Toyota changed for me a lot. 2009. Partially because part of the reason I also really chose Toyota was they paid overtime. So I was effectively an hourly salary person. Uh, so let's just say I made more money than I could dream of as a 23-year-old because I worked 80, 90 hours a week.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah. So you start doing the math, right? And you're working 3 to almost 4,000 hours a year. Um, and it adds up. So, um, it was a rude awakening with the birth of my child and the stock market crashing at almost the same time. So, um, made for kind of a tough period. Yeah, but, you know, on a professional level, again, I didn't get to choose production engineering, but again, that was where I was really glad that I went to production engineering. And what that means is I worked for North America corporate. We were responsible for doing the model launches throughout North America.
Oh
So,
wow. That's really interesting.
yeah, so I worked in the assembly group, and you could just think of kind of all the ergonomic lift assists and or um, automation related to putting a car together. So like I did a lot of trim work, which meant I was putting doors on cars, after they come from paint shop, or you know, doing a headliner lift assist, or um, when we redid the hybrid Camry, there's a really big articulating arm that picks up, an 80, 90 pound battery and stuffs it through the trunk of the car. And somebody's got to design it and build it. So we were kind of uh, it was kind of a fun group because most of us were all in our early 20s. Um, and production engineering basically meant that you worked every weekend. So, you don't stop the factory to make all these changes. You make hundreds of incremental changes over the course of 30 or 40 weekends leading up to the model launch, if that makes any sense. So, You basically make a small change and then pray you don't screw it up when things start up on Sunday night or Monday morning.
Oh man,
Um,
that sounds a
and
little
there's
stressful.
so you learn a lot about risk mitigation. It wasn't like this was our first rodeo. There's lots of check sheets and a lot of sign offs from various groups to make all these changes. Um, so again, it was really good experience. Learned a lot about working with lots of different people. Um, the design and build of the machines was very important, but probably more important was building relationships with new people quickly. Um, because otherwise, you're just this guy. I don't know if we're allowed to say explicit words here, but
Oh, go for
um,
it if you want.
but effectively, nobody liked us. Okay, we're the guys that come in and take a process that's been running for 5 years and has been perfected, or not perfected, but has been improved for 5 years, and now we're going to come in and mess it all up in the name of a model change. And for a lot of these team members that we were working with who had been, at least at Team MK, which is in Kentucky, they've been there for 20 years, which means they've gone through at least 3 or 4 model changes. And so whatever the last production engineer did to them was like what I did to them already. So, if they got a crappy piece of equipment 5 years ago, they were bracing themselves for me to do the same thing to them. And so, what I learned in that whole experience was just uh, spending time with people, getting to know them, um, talking to them, even though nobody told you to talk to them sometimes. So over communicating, even though I didn't know it was called that back then, um, was was something that I learned. But anyway, we could talk for hours about me working at Toyota, but I really enjoyed the experience, and if it wasn't for family reasons, I probably would have continued to work for them, um, at least you know before I left. But moved to Chicago, did through one of my best friends who I met at that casting facility. He had moved into doing automation sales in warehouse and distribution. So think of conveyors and robotics, which I had, at least automation experience, even though I didn't do a whole lot with conveyors at Toyota. I certainly understood them. And that was another great experience because I learned that I sucked at outside sales. So I was not a shy person, but I did not enjoy cold calling. I did not enjoy trying to convince people um, that they needed a product or service. And obviously, that's not the way you want to be doing your marketing and working with people. But effectively, I had enough hubris to think that I could, well, actually, more naivety, I think, to open a new office in Chicago without a sales manager there to really stay on top of me every day. Instead, he would come in, every couple of weeks, and I think personality wise, I loved the doing the applications piece. So once we had a client engaged or a customer, I loved that part, but trying to convince them to hand over a check was just a different process, and certainly got better at it, but ended up deciding that I couldn't handle the swings of being 100% commission, and went back into manufacturing for a small defense contractor here in Chicago. Um, Chose that job based almost 100% on the manager. Um, and there's definitely a lot of opportunity because it was maybe 200-person company um, at the time, doing like 60 million in revenue, um, doing almost all DoD contracting. But it was definitely a way different experience. Almost no automation, uh, technical in its nature, but almost all manual. And so they're doing fuel and water systems for the military, doing inflatable bladders out of nylon reinforced polyurethane fabrics. So that's like a really fancy word for um, think of like wet bags that people use canoeing and stuff.
Hmm.
Just think of something like 4 times stronger and welded into big bags that you know are very similar to what you would find in like wine in a box. There's that little bladder.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. It's exactly that, just the size of a small house.
Wow.
Um,
That's crazy.
yeah, but there again, I uh, certainly enjoyed working with my boss, and when he left, I effectively took his job, and so I found myself managing about 100 some people on the floor with several direct reports, and I was responsible for the revenue and the cost of the military division. Um, it's pretty stressful um, in that we were downsizing. This was during sequestration. I don't know
Oh,
if people are familiar with that term, but effectively what it means is you cut the budget by 10% arbitrarily everywhere. Um, and so, and it was done several times. Um, and this is also when the ground war in Iraq and Afghanistan were kind of winding down. The ground war piece, and that's where we were effectively making most of our sales. So I was in charge of effectively consolidating 3 facilities down to 1 and 2. So it was not a fun time.
yeah.
Um,
I'm not envious of you in that situation.
no, no, I had the privilege of laying off, a lot of people, and you know, I coming from a place like Toyota where effectively the company took losses and didn't fire anyone during 2008. Um, it was very different to have a company where it was kind of slash and burn to protect the margins. Um, and in many ways, now that I am my own business owner, I'm not faulting the owner, but I do think that I think the philosophy is very different. Um, Toyota wanted the capacity to come back, and we just didn't have any interest in keeping that capacity. So, um, anyway, it was a good. And the only reason I bring up that experience is, now that I run my own manufacturing company. Um, that experience educated me a lot on finance, for example. Like, what does a profit and loss statement look like? What should it look like? Um, where does all this money go? Um, and I we do a cash basis accounting, so it's not as complex as accrual. But um, that was there again, like with accrual, I didn't like it only because you book revenue say 3 months in advance, but you don't actually get paid sometimes for 6 months.
Hmm.
Um, and luckily, we had a controller, so it's not like I had to worry about all this stuff. But sometimes they'd come to me and be like, "Hey, how come so and so hasn't paid their invoice yet?" And I'm like, "I don't know. why is this my job?" But
Right.
in the end, it was my responsibility, right? So like, yes, somebody else sends the invoice, but it's on me to make sure the customer pays because I have the relationship. So, um, Yeah, so that was 3 or 4 years, and then gosh, 2016 was when I went out on my own. Decided I was kind of done. Um, there. I live in downtown Chicago, and there aren't a whole lot of factories to work at proximate to where I live. Uh, and for family reasons, I wanted to stay in downtown Chicago. And I thought the best way for me to continue in manufacturing was to be a consultant. So I did that for 2.5 years. Did some automation projects related to it, but that's kind of when DFM Toolworks also started after the first year. So maybe in 2017, 18, I wanted some recurring revenue of any kind, and I heard about this thing called e-commerce. Listened to some podcasts and decided to try my hand at making something and selling it on Amazon. Um, so to catch everyone up, I had an office as a consultant at a co-working space called M Hub, which is a product development space here in Chicago, and it has things like a router, like a legitimate 4x8 router. Um, has, at least for the members, like several Tormachs at the time. Um, so it was kind of a makerspace on steroids, but in reality, it was not a makerspace in the sense that um, people were paying good money to be a part of this space.
Yeah, it seemed
Um,
when I was there a lot more focused on startups
oh,
than.
that's right. You came for I think when Grimsmo and Saunders spoke, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All
It
right. So
was
you've been there.
yeah, it was
Perfect.
really cool. Because it's on the old, what is it, IBM or Motorola factory.
Motorola. Yeah, it was a Motorola. It was basically a place where they did cell phone prototyping. So they weren't running full production there, but they'd have like small lines where they could build phones. Um, so, the infrastructure was certainly there. Uh, millions of dollars of bus bars and airlines and all kinds of stuff all over the place. But yeah, so I did some research online, found that people were selling these wooden grill scrapers uh, for say $10 to $15. Some of them even more money, $20. And I looked up the price of cedar decking at Menards, and was like, yeah, I can do this, which is like a Home Depot. Um, so I made a bunch of them, created a listing, and you know, this was right before Christmas. This was probably October. Again, then the years blend together, but it might have been 2018. And I could go look at my Instagram, I guess. But um, sold a bunch of them basically to people I knew, right? So I like emailed everyone and their brother. And I understood what launching products meant, which is you try to drive as much volume as you can initially to convince Amazon that you're worth serving up organically. And so yeah, that was a good experience. And I didn't make a lot of money because as soon as Christmas ended, like my sales went to zero. And I'm like, God, this was a waste of time. So I didn't like quit on it completely, but it was like going from like, okay, I made a couple $1,000s to now I'm making nothing. So when I say make a couple of thousand, I mean revenue. So they probably just covered the cost of like my time to like figure this all out. Um, and by the way, I was still consulting, um, but I started posting on Instagram, um, and this is kind of walking people into like how did I come into woodworking, which I know is one of the questions we're supposed to answer later.
Yeah, we got a few. We
Um,
can actually jump into that one now if you
yeah, we
want.
could just hop into the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so T5 asked, "Do you have a background in construction or carpentry, and what caused you to start manufacturing tools?" And the pragmatic machinist, one of his questions, Chris's, was, uh, "Why make woodworking tools? Do you do woodworking as a hobby?"
Okay. So this kind of segues into it sort of well because I'm posting these wooden grill scrapers, which you can imagine it looks like a wooden spatula with a handle on it that you use to scrape your grill. And the nice thing about these wooden grill scrapers is they don't have those little steel bristles that can break off and get in your food.
I just scrolled back in your Instagram. It looks like your first post was November 19th, 2017.
Thank you. Okay, so this was Christmas of 17 that I sold a bunch of them. And so where I'm going with this is I posted Instagram and used some woodworking hashtags because I was doing woodworking effectively. And I got all these comments and likes from people that were woodworkers who were like more interested in like me making them than like actually buying them. So it got me interested in like this whole Instagram world of woodworking. And at the time, it was kind of blowing up in 2018, especially, um, where you have thousands of people who are just super focused on improving their skills and showing their wares. But what was amazing is how nice all these people were. So I was like, wow, these people are really nice, and I think they really care about things being made in the United States, which was one of my unique selling propositions for that wooden grill scraper as well. Um, was I wanted to make products in the United States because most people that were jumping on the Amazon bandwagon in the say 2013 to 20 even now 2021 are find something in Alibaba and buy it low, sell it high in the United States, get rich quick scheme. And I wanted to have a business that lasted, so I decided I would only make things in the United States and sell them on Amazon. Um, and so anyway, back to woodworking, I started doing more research into the products that woodworkers buy, and I stumbled upon something called a card scraper. And I was like, oh, cool, I can make that at Hub too, because they have a drop shear. And so what I would do is I would buy coils of blue tempered spring steel and chop them down into cards the size of a little bit bigger. It's a 2.5 by 5 inch card, um, and make okay money at it. And but there again, it wasn't like a quit my job type thing. This was like okay, for a couple hours a week, I can make these things, laser etch them, and then sell them on Amazon. And again, the impetus for that was recognizing that almost all the other card scrapers sold on Amazon at the time were made in Europe or China. So
Okay.
I felt like there was a gap in the market for a card scraper made in the United States. And that is definitely the case now. Um, so yeah, I mean, in terms of why I chose woodworking because on Amazon, there aren't a whole lot of American companies on there. So there might be more American companies. There's probably 50 tool manufacturers in the United States for hand tools, uh, but not all of them focus on Amazon. Okay, so I can't go to Home Depot and compete, but I can go to Amazon and compete, because Amazon doesn't care if I have 50 million in revenue or if I have $5 in revenue. All they care is, does this listing convert on the keywords that the customer typed in to buy this item? So, um, again, I chose woodworking because it's not dominated by Procter and Gamble or some other Fortune 500. So I'm not going to start a business making diapers or start a business. So effectively, the startup capital is what dictated to me starting woodworking, which is a niche. Like certainly woodworking hand tools, right? I'm not selling Makita impact drivers, which to hit a price point that they sell it at, I would have to make it in China.
Right.
There's just no way to make it here.
Yeah, that
So
totally
again,
makes
I chose a market that I could make stuff here. Um, and long term, I want to be in some other markets. Like I think I could be in kitchenware. I think I could be much much greater presence in outdoor stuff. So, I do want to come back to grilling tools at some point. But there again, if I thought I could make a lot of money at it, I'd be doing it right now. But it's a lot more competitive, and not everyone wants to buy a $50 spatula. So woodworking was a spot where I thought the price points were high enough to where I could enter the market and still make a profit.
yeah, and it seems like it's working out for you too.
It's working out so far, yeah. Um, but so again, I think somebody also asked, like, do I do woodworking as a hobby? I'm thankful that I grew up with my dad and my grandfather both being pretty handy around the house. So like, I built furniture prior to even going to college, um, but not like regularly. This is more like take shop class. Yeah, that's right. We had shop class back in the '90s,
Yeah.
but um, but yeah, I'm not like a woodworking expert. So I interviewed with a guy who's writing a book on hand tools, and most woodworking tool manufacturers start out as a woodworker who couldn't buy a tool that he wanted and then started a tool company to make it. I'm like, not that at all. I'm the guy who's like, I want to build a manufacturing company in the United States. Where can I make a product and sell it? So that doesn't mean that I don't love my customers. I absolutely love them. But I use my relationships on Instagram to learn. So I'm trying to learn what they want and how they use the tools, not the other way around. I'm not teaching them all kinds of cool tricks. I'm just trying to build tools that meet their needs. Now, I will say I feel like I've become an expert on certain tools just because I keep making them over and over again, and I get user feedback through Amazon reviews as well as Instagram. So, but I only know what I know. So, like, if I have never made that tool before, let's just pick like a chisel. I haven't made any chisels yet. So, do I feel like I should speak about chisels right now? Probably not, because I don't have time to use them every day, but I will at some point. So, yeah, I think that kind of answers maybe how I got here.
Yeah, totally. So a follow-up question, you said that you jumped immediately to Amazon, and I feel like a lot of people looking into e-commerce and looking into all of this feel like Amazon is a stretch goal. Like they're like, "Oh, I have to sell a ton of stuff." Like what made you choose Amazon as your first place to sell things, and how did you go about that? Because like, I looking from the outside in, if I was going to sell a product or something like that, I'd be like, oh, I'll just list it on my website first, and maybe eventually I'll be able to stock Amazon. But like, I had always heard rumors that you had to have minimum quantities constantly stocked for Amazon and things like that.
So, people aren't wrong to believe that you need to have inventory to do well. But what I would say is to get started, you only need to tell Amazon that you have quantity of one. Okay. So let me explain that. So right now I do almost exclusively fulfilled by Amazon, which means I ship my products in bulk to Amazon and then they do the fulfillment. In that particular case, yes, you don't want to send them one at a time because they will not do well for you. Um, because then they know if you run out. Okay. Whereas if you do what's called fulfill by merchant, which is the default setting in Seller Central, um, you can tell Amazon that you have one, and then as long as you ship within the time frame that you promise, say it's 2 days, just make it in 2 days and ship it. So as long as you hit your fulfillment window, you actually don't need any inventory. You got to be careful though, because if you miss your shipping window and you do it often enough, you'll get penalized. And if you did it long enough, you'd eventually lose your account. So I don't recommend people do just-in-time manufacturing for being an Amazon seller whatsoever. But it all depends on the volume, right? So I'll give you a good example. So I make Damascus marking knives, and I only offer them once a year because I only sold like 40 of them for the entire year. Okay. So if we break that down by month, that's less than 4 a month. And quite honestly, you're never going to make enough money on Amazon selling 4 of anything per month. So yeah, you don't want to jump into Amazon with a Damascus marking knife. But if you jumped into Amazon and you made a carpenter square that sold for $10, like Empire makes them, then you could sell tens of thousands of dollars of them every month. So the key to entering Amazon and succeeding quickly is to pick items that are moving quickly. And there's a tool. There's like 4 or 5 tools, but probably the cheapest tool to get started is something called Jungle Scout, which is a Chrome extension. I'm pretty sure it's still a fixed cost. Like you buy it for a couple $100 one time, and then they maintain it. And what that allows me to do is guesstimate the sales for a given product before really focusing on it. So, while we're talking on this podcast, I could hop into Amazon.com right now and turn on this plugin, and you could give me an item, Dylan, and I could tell you, like, with some certainty how many sell per month.
Really? And that just searches Amazon for that generic
What it's doing is it's a private company, third party, that is using their own proprietary selling information to estimate the sales volume based on the bestseller rank. The bestseller rank is a public metric published by Amazon, and you can look at it on any product. You just gotta scroll down far enough, because the bestseller rank is usually not like right at the top. But if I scroll down far enough, it should be somewhere on this detail page.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at yours right now. I see it on here.
Yeah. So effectively that number, what this proprietary software does is it says, okay, you're this number in that category. We estimate you're selling 400 a month or whatever the number is.
Oh wow.
Okay. So I've looked at their estimates versus my own actual sales data. And I'd say it's within 10 to 20% plus minus. Depends on, because it's a relative weighting, it can get thrown off if, say, I have a really good month and everyone has a really bad month, meaning other products within the Amazon category,
Mm-hmm.
then it'll underestimate how good of a month I'm having, or it'll overestimate it. So it's all relative to everyone else on the market.
But even 10 or 20%, that's still a pretty good, estimate.
It gives you some good confidence, right?
Yeah.
But that's for existing products. So I can tell you that when I started Card Scrapers, what I did, because somebody else asked, how did you like figure out if you're ready? And I'm just trying to look through. But effectively, all I'd said to myself was, okay, the card scraper market I estimate to be, say, $30,000 a month. Um, I want to grab 10% of that to get started. Okay, so I just want to make $3,000 a month for that particular product line. That was the goal. Like, all I did was figure out the estimated sales for all the top items within that category or within that search term and say, I eventually want to be one of these top 10. Um, so, for anyone that's looking to launch on Amazon, just send me a DM on Instagram and I'll happily forward you some more resources. But, information is everything. Or sorry, information is one thing, but action is everything. So like, um, I know, for example, that there's another company selling an IoT device that I think I could make, and they make $1 million a month. Okay, on just one SKU, one item.
Wow.
Would I love to hop into that? Absolutely. But do I have the bandwidth right now? And do I think somebody from China could undercut it eventually? I do. So there's certain opportunities that you identify, and then you have to decide, is it defensible or not? So for electronic devices, people don't seem to care as much if it's made in the United States. That's just my 2 cents. And there's probably, actually, it's not my 2 cents. We could go use this search tool and quantify that people really don't care that it's made in China as long as it's under $100 or whatever the price point is.
Right.
As seen by my $1,000 iPhone that's made in China. Um, so anyway, I just want to dispel the idea that you need a lot of capital and you need a lot of inventory. But what you do need is information that validates that you're hopping into an existing market. I would not recommend coming out with a new product that does not already exist on Amazon. That is a waste, not a waste. It is not the best investment of your time. That's where Kickstarter or your Instagram following or some other YouTube, another platform where people get to know you. Amazon, in general, Amazon buyers don't care who I am. The majority of them don't know who DFM Toolworks is. What they do know is if you go look at my card scraper listing, I have 600 positive reviews that are over 4.5 stars. So that's what they know, if that makes any sense.
Right. No,
Okay. So
Yeah.
Amazon is not about your brand. Amazon is about having the right product uh, with the right unique selling proposition and with the reviews to back it up. That's what Amazon's all about. People are searching and they want to buy something within 20 minutes. They're not now. To be fair, are people Googling me off of Amazon and they probably found me on Amazon? Absolutely. But based on my website sales, which by the way, the website's not that great. Don't don't think that it's my main revenue source. But like I said, I think just judging by what a lot of Insta machinists that I see and that have their own products, some of them are super niche products and they would not do as well on Amazon because either the price point is too high, or it doesn't exist on Amazon, so nobody knows to search for it. So that's kind of the two things against it. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
And
So
last thing I'll say about Amazon is that as a data guy, that I love is I used to sell a $50 marking knife, and let's just say it didn't do that well. But I got sales information from it where I am super confident that if I sell a $40 knife, I am almost certain that I could double my units per month. Okay. So if you do the math, right, I only reduced my price by 20%, but I doubled my sales,
Wow.
right? So I'm just explaining that you got to get started to succeed. So even if you fail, like let's say that you start making niche car parts, right? And for your car, and you want to list them on Amazon. Even if you only sold one a month, I would find that to be a success because now you know that there you make 12 a year and you will sell all 12, right? You now know, like you have sales, and that is the only truth. Forget about what other people say. You sold them. And oh, by the way, you're not having to post on Instagram every day to do it. You create the listing, you start some pay-per-click campaigns, and it's very passive. Okay. So I do, you know, without getting into too many details, let's just say I do roughly 60 to 100 orders a day, and I fulfill zero of them. So my only job is to not run out of stuff
Okay.
and do good sales forecasting and marketing. And, there's a lot of other work to do, but I'm just explaining that at one point I almost treated like Amazon as my outlet store. So for example, I came out with a American tie-dye small carpenter square, and the lot minimum to make it to where it was a reasonable price to the customer, I had to make 100 of them. Well, guess what? I didn't sell all 100. So I took the excess and I listed it on Amazon, shipped it in, and now I'm selling them on Amazon. Now, is it making me a lot of money? No, it is not making me a lot of money. But did I lose money? No. So that is one of the benefits to already being comfortable with selling on Amazon is I'm effectively for certain items, I'm not spending a lot of money on driving people to that listing, but people are buying it. Which now gives me one more data point because it's $10 more than my regular square. So it
Huh.
gives me an idea of what the price sensitivity is.
Okay. That makes a
So,
lot of sense, and that sounds like an excellent tool for you. I mean, it like you said, you're not losing out on money, and you're not losing money
well,
by
if I
storing.
didn't sell any, I would have lost money. So I'm
Right.
just explaining
Right.
that. And would I keep coming out with two-tone anodized products? No. Like it's solidifying for me that it's still too expensive. Otherwise, it'd be flying off the shelves right now, if
Right.
that makes any sense,
No, definitely.
relative to my other product. So it proves to me that people want to save their $10.
Right.
Same product, just looks different,
Yeah. It's
and it costs more.
not
So
not enough of a value proposition for them to spend the extra money. I got you.
either that, or maybe they don't like it. I mean, some people don't like it. So that's fine too. So anyway, this doesn't have to be all about Amazon, but I do want to encourage people. And there's some machinists I've already talked to about getting on Amazon, and thankfully it sounds like they are because I know they could crush it. So I won't embarrass them, but I think they know who they are.
It sounds like it's worth. I mean, it's not a ton of.
Meaning, I want them to already be on there, right? Like I want to be like, hey, I want to help you out and leave you a review, right? So it's like because that's the other thing too is I think because it is a fairly tight knit group, like if people are trying to launch something in Amazon, they should totally be DMing everyone that they know and be like, hey, would you mind considering purchasing this item and leaving a review? Because even just one review is orders of magnitude better than no reviews. So just keep that in mind when somebody asks you for a review. It's more valuable than buying the product.
Huh. That's great. So one of the other questions we got. So you signed up for Amazon, or you already signed up for Amazon.
Yep.
When do you know that your product is done? Joshua from FirmWorks asked, when
Ooh.
you're working on a new product, how do you know when you're ready to release to the public?
I think it varies by product, but I have the benefit of now doing this for I guess 3 years, 4 years almost. What I would say is on some products, it's a long product development cycle. I am working on a new product as we speak. Uh, it's called a diamond lapping plate. and it's a very niche product. It's used to lap your water stones. I've used it to lap my own oil stones. And lapping, as some of you guys might know, is to make things flat. So um, these just happen to be coated in diamonds so that they're harder than the substrate that you're working on. And um, I've been working on this for probably 6 months almost now. And I probably thought of it almost a year ago. So it takes time for certain products, especially when I'm working with a third party, because I don't have a diamond coating machine here. Okay. Like I can make the metal part of this, but I can't do the coating. So when you're working with third parties, I think it always slows things down. And it also means that you need to do more due diligence before you think it's ready for public release. So it's more expensive. And the other thing too is I always send out samples. So when I have prototypes, I know the woodworkers in my community who are they're not product, sorry, they're, subject matter experts in that particular tool. So I send it to them and I say, hey, what do you think? And as long as they think it's good, I hit the go button. Like, I don't try to overthink some of this stuff because I am not the customer. So I think if people are, if business owners are like, I don't know if it's ready yet, it's ready when a customer says it's good. Now, free product versus buying it, totally different conversion rate. But I'm just saying that if, say, 3 or 4 people who really know what they're doing and who use substitutes or use comparable products say it's as good or better, and you'll always get some negative feedback saying, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that. You at some point just have to decide, are they the 10% or are they the 90%? If only 10% are complaining about something, guess what? They are not your customer and you make money with the 90%. Now, does that mean I haven't had flops? Look, I have a great example would be the small carpenter square. Sold a boatload of them on Instagram, went to Amazon and didn't sell crap for like almost 12 months. Now it is selling really well. And, a lot of that has to do with additional traffic due to COVID. But I also think some things just take time to get validation from certain people in the market. So what happened in that year? Well, there were a couple of YouTubers that used my product that gave more people confidence to buy it and understand the value proposition. And quite honestly, it just means I did a crappy job of marketing it, but they helped me market it, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a great product. I can't wait to make more of them. But had you asked me 12 months ago, after I launched it 24 months ago, am I excited about small carpenter squares? I'd be like, yeah, it was kind of a one-hit wonder. So back to his question, I mean, definitely create prototypes, send them to people, get feedback, but don't get stuck in the loop of like making 50 prototype iterations. I would say more than 3 and you're overthinking it. Or it sucks. And launch it. Like, it sucks. It launches. And look, I have my own ego. Do I want everything to go well the first time? Absolutely. But I think the difference between me maybe and some other people is, I want to say halfway through 2019, I switched over to DFM Toolworks full time and with like no money. And so I was launching as fast as I could because I had to pay the bills. Like, once you burn the boats or burn the ships, that helps you tremendously, I think. Because now, do I pay my mortgage or do I launch more products? Or sorry, am I afraid to launch this product or do I pay my mortgage? Right? Like, you just do it. And if it doesn't go well, people talk about fail fast. The thing that sucks about all this is it takes a long time, I think, to properly market. So for example, like, I have 20 different product ideas right now. In the course of 20 weeks, could I machine all 20 of them? Yes, probably. Could I machine them in a cost-effective manner? No. For me to make money on all these different products, I probably spend 2 to 3 weeks just figuring out, how do I make this thing and touch it as little as possible? And how do I work with my outside vendors to, make this work? So like I said, I've gotten some people reaching out to me on different products, and I just say make it.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. The more I get into making things, it seems like that is the common sentiment: is just get it out there. Like even if it's not, even if you're not 100% happy with it, just get it out
Yeah,
there. So
yeah, and the other thing too, related to that, is I have launched some products where I don't have the cost where I want it, but I know that I got to sell it at a certain price. And the way I justify that is typically I kind of think to myself, well, okay, I make almost no money on the first 100, but if I eventually get to 1,000 units a year, that'll justify this tool and this setup, and now I can make money on it. Or, we don't need to get too far into this, but like, for example, let's just say that I'm doing blanket orders with some of my material pricing to lock in a better price. Okay. But I had to sell that product for 18 months to have the confidence to then place a $20,000 order for the year. Does that make any sense? So like my spot buys at $5,000 four times a year was getting me crappy pricing. But if I went back to that same supplier and I'm like, look, I'm going to commit to all $20,000 up front. What's your best price for the year? And we'll do it in releases of, one quarter every quarter. These are things that, unless you're in purchasing or knowledgeable about this stuff, you may not know that you can do this. So now I've tried doing this on aluminum and I've gotten shot down everywhere. So if you're making something out of aluminum, good luck. But on the tool steel, I was able to do a blanket.
that's really nice. Yeah, I've heard.
It is and it isn't, Dylan, because what if I stop selling that product? What if the market says, because I've had a few competitors come in on that particular product on Amazon, and they are stealing some of my revenue, almost using my same keywords too. It's kind of annoying. And it's not even the
Ooh,
same. It's not like they carbon copied the same product. That would have made me actually more upset. But I'm just pointing out, like, if they did a better job of marketing, I wouldn't say in trouble, but I'd be sitting on more inventory than I'd like. So I'm just explaining, like, there's risks to everything. I could not have made that commitment 3 years ago. That'd be probably the other piece of advice, is to build business credit as fast as you can. It's easy to pay for stuff with credit cards, but if you can convince somebody to give you business credit, like McMaster-Carr, I'll give it to you, no problem. Some other MSC, I think too. You just want to start doing that. It's one of those where nobody wants to lend to you. Nobody wants to be the first lender. You need to build some business credit to be able to do what I did. Like, you can't just ask for a blanket PO and not have business credit. That's not going to happen. Doesn't matter how much money you have. Like, they'll be happy if you prepay the whole year. Yeah, I guess I could do that, but I wouldn't have that money. So yeah, let's hop on to some other questions.
so Built by Hatch had a couple questions, both about your packaging and finishing processes. So you were talking about your American tie dye. How do you come up with these? How do you are you doing these in house, or how are you working with your anodized house to do these kind of crazy
Sure.
finishes?
So my finishing process for aluminum certainly is machine it, tumble it, send it to my anodizer. I've been through several anodizers. I know everyone has. I certainly like working with the anodizer that I'm working with now, only because they're like 15 minutes from where I work, and they're literally between me and my house. So if there is any rework that ever has to be done, which is rare, it's as simple as dropping it back off. And in fact, I get to look at it before I take it with me. Whereas I used to do it with a few places outside of state. What was frustrating is you ship it for $50 to $100 to them. They do whatever they do, ship it back to you. You pay for that, by the way. And then if it's no good, you're paying to ship it back. And by the way, you're losing weeks. So in terms of the crazy coatings, I kind of convinced them to do that again. They did it a long time ago. It's not a very profitable enterprise, I don't think. It's very labor intensive. They have to mask the areas that you don't want that color in the second time. So, like, for example, my understanding, I believe, is they dye it blue, mask it, strip it, and then dye it red, and then take the masking off, and voila, you have blue and red. And the masking stops the acid from attacking that area. So it's not cheap, and you have to be patient. So again, I don't plan on doing a whole lot of them, but I at the time I was looking to, it takes a lot of time to develop a product, and so if I can now sell a new variation and only invest a week or two in figuring out this new anodizing process, it's well worth it. But what I've also learned is there's only so many people that want it. So yeah, that's the only finishing process other than grinding. I finish grind stuff, but that's about it.
Okay. And then what about packaging, especially on like, is there things that they force you to do that you've carried over to your other customers? I know you cut a bunch of foam, it looks like, on a router you guys have.
Yeah.
Uh, let's go into
So the packaging, Amazon is happy as long as your product doesn't get destroyed in transit and it still has the barcode on it when I send it to them. So you may buy some things on Amazon and it comes in like a Ziploc with, a sticker on it. Now that works for some products. My card scrapers ship in a reclosable bag, but that reclosable bag is made out of 8 mil thick plastic, which is like 4 times as thick as most other bags. But then I also ship my squares in foam because people are buying those typically as a measuring instrument. And so I want all the surfaces to survive Amazon and UPS or Amazon and the Postal Service. So really what drives the packaging is me. I get to decide how much money I want to spend on packaging. So, a card scraper sells at $15. I can't afford a $3 packaging system. Whereas I sell a square for $40, then yes, I can afford $3 on packaging and still make money. So a lot of it's driven by the product, the price point, and what the customer needs it to do.
So if with your carpenter squares, are you shipping them packaged complete carpenter squares in foam in a small box and then boxing up all those small boxes to send to Amazon, or are you just
Yeah.
stacking foam and then they're reboxing them?
I cannot trust them to do the latter.
Okay.
Um, no, I mean, I can barely trust ourselves to do it. We drop them every once in a while. So it's kind of wasteful in some respects, but it guarantees that, with almost an inch of foam in every direction around the product, that it's going to make it. I would happily drop any of my packaged squares from a tall building and trust that it'll survive. Now, the one problem that I don't like about it, but Amazon helps solve that problem, is it gets very bulky. So like 16 squares takes up a cubic foot. 16 of those small carpenter squares.
Mhm.
So to store, a lot of them, it starts eating up a small space. So they warehouse most of my products for me, and the warehousing's pretty cheap. In fact, like if you didn't have to sell stuff, Amazon would be the best warehouse in the world in terms of price per cubic foot. But they're subsidizing it so that you can sell lots of stuff and they get their 15%. So plus their fulfillment by Amazon fee. So yeah, it's kind of a good marriage in that respect. And again, the packaging, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Like now that I've started this foam craziness, like I feel like I have to keep going with it because people love it. And I do think it sometimes actually sells some of the product, as weird as that might sound. I think some of my customers love organizing their tools, and this is just one more way of doing it, and they didn't have to do anything.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's worth it. I know we have started. I mean, it's a totally different market segment, but we overpackage everything because we've had a few things damaged in shipment. By what I can only assume falling off the back of a truck or something.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and I'd much rather put a box inside a box with a bunch of bubble wrap and whatever I can because it just makes more sense to get it to the customer intact.
Yeah, I think being a job shop, you guys have some challenges, but what I would highly recommend looking at is doing two-part foam with a Ziploc bag, a heavy duty Ziploc bag around the product, and just pour two-part foam and call it done. That is like bulletproof. Now it's not cheap, but if you're shipping a couple $1,000s worth of parts, it might be worth buying $50 worth of foam. So just something to think about. I haven't done the economics of it for your particular application, but you also don't have the benefit that I have, which is I know what I'm making, so I get to spend 2 hours figuring out how to make it out of foam on a router.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm really actually what I'd love to a laser in the future so that I could cut foam to fit and not waste time. Um, like for you, it makes sense to cut a whole bunch of them at once, but yeah, it's a tough balance to say, how much do I put into custom packaging versus just bubble wrap it to the nth degree and throw it in a bigger box.
Yeah, I think what's interesting though is I think it's all on a case by case basis. But if you are getting a repeat job of any kind, I would seriously consider trying to figure out packaging for it with the expectation from the customer that they send it back to you, because then it starts to make sense. And that's how I justified all those anodizing packaging stuff. I was like, I'm gonna make this once, and by the way, some of those foam trays I've used for 3 years. Like, worth every minute that I spent making.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's tough. It all, if you're doing little $500, $1,000 orders, it's hard. But maybe build a relationship though with a local sign shop or somebody that's got a router, and send them a step file, or you could send them a DXF, and they just cut out that cutout. All they need to know is the depth, right? So, all you need is a vacuum table. By the way, for the first 2.5 years, I double-sided taped my phone. I did not have a vacuum.
Really?
Nope. I when I tell people, sometimes the costs are out of control on your first product. Like, I wasn't selling enough foam enclosed products to go out and buy a $12,000 router. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if that means I just have to sacrifice, way too much labor initially, then that's the proof of concept. It was nasty too. I mean, I was doing the double-sided blue tape trick, where you tape the foam up with blue-sided tape, and then initially I used to put blue-sided tape down on the router table on the wasteboard. I've since skipped that step, and now I just have spray adhesive just permanently on there. Don't even bother scraping it off, because you want it sticky for the next one.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, for several years I was using spray adhesive and blue-sided tape.
Hey, if it works.
And the only other tip is use Gorilla Tape for the outer edges, because that's where it peels.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's where the failures are always at the corners. So that's true even in vacuum holding.
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely like little corner screws or something just to hold it down from shifting.
Yeah, and I'm sure there could have been better ways to do it. Like, people use plastic nails where the router bit just like flies right through it. The only reason I don't do that is I don't want my customers to have packaging that they receive and then there's a plastic nail on it. Like, that's not what I expect them to receive. But yeah, for like the anodizing packaging, absolutely, just shoot plastic nails through it.
Right.
Anodizer's not going to care, and your parts probably won't get scratched by it either. So yeah, I mean, don't want to belabor packaging too much, but it's certainly been a differentiator for us for now. And it's even allowed me to do some outsourcing. So I sent a job to Tony Klauser. He made my brass hammerheads for me. Because,
oh, really?
He's got a bar feeder and twin turret and a bunch of live tooling and stuff, which I don't have. So the part is perfect for his setup. And could I make it myself in a mill cheaper? I could, but unless I'm selling thousands of them a month, the differential, I save the money in me not having to do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're still a small company, so it's not like you've got a bunch of excess labor to throw around on things like that.
Not only that, but I just haven't made the investment in a lathe. And you know, if you got a hammer, everything's a nail. You know, I'm going to keep selling milled products as long as I only have a mill.
Definitely.
Um, so yeah, you want to hop to the next one?
Yeah, yeah. So Rob's last question was, is there any special considerations when producing measuring equipment? How much more must your machine be dialed in to achieve accurate over precise result?
Okay. So I got this question obviously just an hour ago or an hour and a half ago, but um, you know, one of the things that I think you need to think about is what does my product do? So it's one thing if I'm making something for someone else and there's a print. We kind of have an internal print and has, because I'm selling squares, for example, squareness is kind of inherent to the machine. So I machine all the important surfaces in op one. And then op two is literally just take off the hat. Like, so as long as my machine isn't out of square, my squares are square.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
as long as there isn't like a problem with the X or Y axes ball screws or something weird going on with the control, um, they're square. And by the way, I do check them, but I'm just explaining that I didn't go out and buy a CMM. Okay, you don't need one. You do the old like I have a straight edge, draw a line, flip the square over, draw another line, and they should be the same line. Like there you go. Now, do I check them more than that? Yes. But I'm just explaining that I'm selling these to people who are doing woodworking. So, I've started to share that, yeah, I mean, we do have an internal tolerance of a thousandth of an inch, but I don't market it as such. There's other companies that do, and I don't want to get into a accuracy race. You know, oh, ours is good to 5/10 now. So we're really based on, do you want to buy a quality square made in the United States? Then this is your square. If you want to buy a square that's been checked by some super laser machine, then there's another company that does that. And that's fine. Like you can pay more money for theirs because that pays for their laser. And then how do you dial it in? Work holding is like critical, especially in op 2. So I don't care if you've got a DMG Mori or if you've got, my Haas. You won't get flat and parallel unless your work holding's flat and parallel to the machine. So, um, if you don't want tapered parts, then you need to use stuff that's flat. And another way too is just machine stuff in place. So one of my strategies going forward, if I want to hit super high tolerances, is guess what? I'm just going to mill those soft jaws every time. If I want stuff parallel, I'm going to machine it, not move it, put the part in, machine it.
Definitely.
So are those soft jaws, between $25 and $70? Yeah. But, the other way, now that I have a probe, is I can probe and rotate stuff. I have way more tools at my disposal to hit accuracies that are unnecessary. So I choose not to do them. I've invested in a Pearson pallet system. I've checked it several times, and it's good to a couple tenths every time. So, because I don't promise less than 3/10. I don't need to do anything crazy. Now, what I would say is I am doing more in process probing, so that if there is something out of spec, the machine will stop and we're just going to throw those parts away. Or maybe I'll try to rework them depending on where they are in the process. Meaning if it's oversized, we still got something left and we'll machine it. But, I am adding that. So like, for example, I'm producing 6-inch carpenter squares. 6 months ago, I didn't probe anything, but I measured everything by hand manually with a mic or with a caliper. Now I have this fancy machine that'll just do it for me.
So speaking of machines, let's kind of chat about what you got. Because you went in on one with GJ Motorsports as well. You guys have an Instagram
That's
for
how we
that.
got started, yeah. So Tom and I met at Hub in probably 2018, maybe late 2017. We shared a garage at M Hub, which was like, gosh, I can't even remember, like probably 300 square feet. And but we used the machines outside of that little garage, right? So it's not like we had the Tormax stuffed into the garage with us. But M Hub, I have many good things to say about M Hub, but they had no desire to incubate people past a certain point. They preferred that we'd send out our parts to shops like yourself or Xometry or whatever for your first big production run. They didn't want you to like dominate the Tormach for like 3 weeks at a time. So that's kind of the impetus for us to move into where we are now, which is called Machine Runway, which does have its own Instagram, but we fail to post on it very often. But yeah, so Machine Runway is the company that Tom and I co-own, which effectively pays our rent for this space. And the VF2 was a used one from 2005. We bought it at auction. Do not recommend ever buying anything sight unseen on an auction. We spent a couple weeks, almost 2 months when it really came down to it, and a lot of money to replace at least one server or servo drive. Something was messed up with the main board, and the tool changer gave us a lot of headaches. So, and by the way, we thought we were getting a tool setter. It didn't work. It was totally busted.
Oh,
right? So like we priced in a good tool setter. That was like the justification to buy this one versus like a local one that we could just go look at that didn't have it. So yeah. Anyway, that got us started and in the new shop, which was October 2018. And here recently in August, I took delivery on a VF4 SS. And the reason I seriously looked at HMCs just because I love the automation aspect of it and the fact that you get, depending on your tombstone size, like 1,800 square inches. So like I built these spreadsheets where it's like, what is my cost per square inch? Okay, so like what is a VF4 versus used horizontal? And by the way, I was looking at only used. So like I spent probably 6 months looking at used equipment. And when it boiled down to getting financing, it was just so much easier to finance a new machine that I was like, well, I guess I'm getting a new machine. Because I almost pulled the trigger on an all cash deal on a used HMC. But what would have happened then is I would have had no cash reserves, like zero. Like if something horrible happened to it, sure, I had a contingency of like $5,000, but if it exceeded that, then I literally had no more money. So whereas with buying the VF4, I could put in a 20% down payment and still have cash. So rather than buying like a $30,000 or $40,000 used machine, I was like, I will just buy this $100,000 and some $1,000 VF4 and only put down $20,000.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And
so,
from what I've heard, Haas makes the financing incredibly.
I went with a third party.
Oh, really?
The reason for that is this was still during COVID, so I had no desire to do a 60-month repayment plan when I could do a 72. Am I doing 72? No, I'm doing more than that. I'm doing 84 months. So am I paying more in interest? Yeah, but guess what? The interest rates are amazing. Like 5%.
Right.
Like if you can't grow faster than 5%, you need to go work for somebody else. People talk about being fiscally conservative. Absolutely. But I did the opposite where I'm cash conservative. So I cut my payment almost in half by going to 84 months.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I'm not going to like sit here and talk about my finances the whole time, but I do want to share that, am I going to pay more for this machine? Yes. Am I going to really care? No, because I'm pretty sure, I haven't done the math yet, but I might have paid for the machine almost. But now I get to keep that cash, right? So now I get to go buy more inventory.
Yeah,
and sell more stuff.
That's super, super important.
Yeah, the working capital is what becomes super important. And so, as soon as I bought that machine, guess what? I then went out and got a line of credit. So, but you can't do that until you have at least 2 years of tax records. Which I had. But, I just say that, I want to believe that I'm being conservative in my machine purchases. That's actually why I went with the VF4 instead of the HMC. It's not for everybody. I mean, I seriously consider it a BT30 machine too, just because it's way cheaper.
We had one question roll in while we were talking from Nick at 523 Industries, and he used to live in Chicago and was asking,
Oh,
do you have any issues running a business in Chicago, like in the city proper? You know, taxes, regulations, ordinances that would normally or make your business harder than it could be.
there's certainly some regulations that are a little burdensome. I think one of the things that bothers me the most is the use tax. So I'm paying just for the privilege of buying anything and using it here in the city of Chicago. And so there's definitely some tax reporting burdens that I have. So I'm actually looking to hire a fractional controller to help me just deal with all this stuff. I'm just tired of becoming an expert in something for a couple days and then forgetting about it for 3 months and then having to do it all over again. So what I can say is I can thank Chicago for forcing me to spend money on good accounting help sooner. So and by the way, I sell in 50 states. So sales tax is not fun.
Right.
So would I start a business in Chicago again? I think what's unfortunate about manufacturing is we don't get the same love that, say, some of these big tech companies get. So, when Amazon wants to find out where to relocate, everyone's like, sending 50 people to lobby them. But if a manufacturer came in, I think the biggest problem with Chicago and Illinois in general is the union. So I managed a union on the south side of Chicago for 4.5 years. I can promise you this: I will shut my company down before there's ever a union at my company. It's a waste of middle management. You effectively are hiring a third party middle manager that is not useful and is incentivized to have a job, which means being in opposition to whatever you want to do
Right.
to justify their existence. So all you have to do is treat your employees really well, and they won't unionize. So that's my solution. I'm paying people above market rate, and through automation, I desire to always overpay people because my labor content is not the driving factor in my cost of goods sold. So that's my strategy around working in Chicago.
Okay.
That and the price per square foot is awful. So, we are relocating. I don't have a signed lease, but Tom and I are working on that for a new space not too far from here. But, if we went just 30 minutes outside the city, or no, actually just a couple minutes outside of the city, but 30 minutes further west from where we are now, we could cut our price per square foot in half again. And if we went another hour, we'd cut it down in half again. So I think the cost of space is probably more burdensome than running a business. Or sorry, is probably more burdensome than taxes, but the taxes do play into it. So, like in my new lease, we are responsible for our portion of the taxes.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
businesses have been targeted in Chicago historically so that mayors can get reelected. The businesses only have so many votes, whereas the residents have millions of votes. So let's just say that I'm not too happy about running a business in Chicago sometimes, and I don't want to belabor it, but let's just say that when I used to run that company on the south side, I did the math many times on moving to Indiana, which was only at the time 45 minutes away from that facility. We'd basically keep the same employees who would just commute a half hour south instead of north and cut our expenses dramatically. So, and workers' comp in Illinois is horrible. So if several people got hurt at DFM Toolworks, I could potentially go out of business because there again, Illinois is super employee favorable.
Hmm.
People have 90 days to report an injury,
Oh,
and the burden of proof is on the employer to prove that it did not happen at work.
jeez, that's rough.
Right. So after working in a place like Kentucky, where you have 24 hours and the employee kind of has to prove stuff, we had people at my former employer who got hurt playing soccer, tore an ACL, and then claimed it happened at work. And we're left with a $70,000 workers' comp bill.
Jeez.
So, yeah, because it's, rehab and surgeries for 5 years.
Right. Oh yeah.
So I on somebody else's dime, I have learned what it means to run a larger business in Chicago, and it's expensive.
That's crazy.
Um, so there again, hopefully we hire good, honest people, which so far we have, and that's how we mitigate the, you know, effectively Chicago doesn't want people to actually work here. I mean, they just don't. Like, they could talk about jobs programs so the cows come home, but there's a reason most manufacturers are in the collar counties. It's because Cook County has mismanaged their funds and has pension obligations that are just unsustainable. So, and people can read about that. So I won't belabor it anymore.
Wow. Well, let's get on to a better subject. What's in the shop? What's going on? You guys, you've been posting a lot of these Pearson pallets that you've been making and kind of getting that workflow
Yeah.
down. What's new at DFM and how has that affected your company and your workflow?
We are still recovering from Christmas. We had a great Christmas in terms of sales. Fourth quarter is really what makes or breaks an e-commerce business, no matter what you sell, as long as it's direct to consumer, or sorry, a consumer product, I should say. We did well enough. We didn't stock out too much, and some of that has to do with managing COVID. So I couldn't ship in products sometimes because Amazon just couldn't take it in. But in terms of our current state, we are just trying to shore up our inventory, which is why I haven't done a whole lot of actual posts for DFM Toolworks, because we're not making anything new. We're just trying to dial in what we already make so that we can be more efficient and move on to the next product. So, and move, by the way. So, um, at this point, it's, we don't have the leisure. I shouldn't say leisure. We don't have the ability right now to do a bunch of shop projects, but also at the same time, we hopefully only have a couple months left. So the incentive is kind of low to invest anymore in this space when, I anticipate spending a lot of money in the new space. But yeah, in terms of new stuff, still learning how to maximize the automation on the new machine. Tom has helped me with editing my postscripts pretty heavily so that I do all kinds of cool stuff in the background. Probably the biggest thing that, and everyone has a different way of skinning this cat, but, I really hated how the way you do pass-throughs through the native post processor, it threw it in before you got to a safe height in the previous operation.
Yeah,
So it would insert it in like the worst place.
it's really annoying.
I'm like nothing bad would happen if you know what you're doing, but I don't want to have to always think about that for the next couple of years. So we spent a lot of time. Well, I hacked my way to fixing it, just looking at some posts online through the Fusion forum. But we then further refined it and add some more stuff. So, like for example, I can now insert D prints, which is customized to what I want in my reporting for the probe. That was little, so lots of little tweaks. So the new things are trying to get the machine to do more. I just threw in a through air tool. So I bought an 1/8" end mill tool holder from Mari Tool. It's a set screw side lock, and all it does is blow air or shoot high pressure coolant.
Oh, cool. Blow thing.
And the whole idea is I'm no longer blowing off my parts. Like I don't blow them off. And yes, I have a chip fan, but good luck ever achieving the level of cleanliness as just blowing the parts off. So what I do is I chip fan it and then I blow it off. And the idea is and like when I make my small squares, there are 7 holes per part, 20 parts. So there's 140 holes to blow out. I just get inundated in chips. And what I would like is a nice clean shop and go home and not, have to strip down like I do right now. So
I know the feeling for sure.
yeah, well, once your significant other steps on a steel chip, you strip off at the door ever since. So that that my friend is a one-time deal.
Yeah.
So pulling a something the size of a toothpick out of your foot is not fun. But yeah, so trying to leverage the automation within the machine as much as possible. And yes, I drool over all kinds of new toys that I want to buy, but really the focus right now is inventory high so that when I shut the machine down for potentially a month, I'm not stressed out about it. And now I'm just stressed out about, everything else that has to do with moving. So that's kind of new. That's what's new.
Cool. That sounds great. Yeah, I saw your video of the wash down tool, and that's a pretty neat idea.
Yeah.
I've seen a few people do that, and if I had more tool spaces, I would definitely strongly consider having one in there permanently. But I might even add one just for those special jobs where it makes the most sense.
Yeah, would I use it on every job? No. Like, I don't need it if, say, I made my dowel plates necessarily, but for some of these Op2 fixtures where these little chips go into these mighty bites all over the place, it's just such a mess outside of the machine that I'm trying to have the machine do more because I'm ending up doing it regardless. Now, you could argue about, I mean, I would love to have another conversation someday about throughput versus operator time. But I think people love that whole spindle cutting chips thing. But I choose, I guess, to sacrifice a minute or two every cycle to clean my parts now, so that I don't.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And,
Well, it's the same as like a lot of people say, "Oh, well, probing's adding so much cycle time," but it's
oh, dude,
if you
all
cut
you gotta
that,
do is destroy a tool or destroy a fixture, and probing will have paid for like the first 5 hours of probing.
exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
I in my op2, every op2 I probe. Op1 is a lot faster. I guess what I'm saying is in op2 I'm probing every part
Right.
because if I misload it and it flies out of that clamp, something's broken. Or I've gotten lucky and something hasn't broken. But I'd rather be good than lucky. And whereas usually I like to be lucky rather than good. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of having the machine make consistent decisions. My next, which would bring me into what did I research?
Oh yeah.
I have been heavily researching. So coming out of automotive, we used to use nut runners that were electronically controlled. So we knew the torque angle, all kinds of good stuff that was used for traceability. So like if a bolt ever came loose on a car 20 years from now, not 20, but whatever the warranty period was, we would know the shot taken on that vehicle for that bolt. If it's a critical item, right? Like a seatbelt bolt or bolts that are mounting the engine into the car, stuff like that. So I want to bring that technology to a job shop, or sorry, to a production shop, which might sound crazy, right? It's like some of these guns can be $10,000, but what I'd like to do is take away one more variable, which is, did I tighten everything? And did I tighten everything well? And one of those guns can do that. Now, my miniature step has been I've bought a bunch of cheap $90 electronic ones only because I don't believe they go out of spec as quickly because it's just a strain gauge. Whereas, some of the torque wrenches that I've bought now that I'm checking them against a calibrated tool are like way out, like way under, because they're just worn out. So like, can I buy new torque wrenches, every month or every 2 months or whatever, start documenting the trend and decide, okay, we're just going to throw away these Amazon specials every so often or buy nicer ones that we can recalibrate. But my research topic is, how do I buy something for, say, under $1,000 that I can now communicate with the machine and say, this pallet's ready. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Because I know it can be done, because I used to hook up, Allen Bradley PLCs to these nut runners. It would say run program 10, and the nut runner would be like, okay, I'm going to run program 10, which means I'm tightening 6 of these bolts down. They should rotate X number of times before tightening and tighten at a certain rate. And that prevents people from cheating. Because if you didn't have that fancy nut runner, all you got to do is have that same bolt bolted into a fixed item, and you can just click it off all day long, right? Like, that's easy. So click wrenches are kind of garbage if you want to know that it actually got done. So am I going to shell out 10 grand? No, but I might down the road if I can spread it across, say, 5 machines.
Right. Well, we were just talking about that on the Discord last night, actually. Somebody else was asking about those, and I had looked into them for work.
Where I would just scan a pallet. Like literally it would stay on the machine.
Right. Right.
So it wouldn't talk to wouldn't talk to the Haas necessarily, but the nice thing about a nut runner is it won't run if the program fails. So like there's ways to set up administrative controls where the only way to reset that thing and the only way for it to start working again is for me as the team leader to come over and reset it.
Yeah.
Now,
Mounts makes some. Tonichi makes some. Those are the ones we were looking at last night.
I've only been familiar with Atlas Copco, and I'm still waiting to hear back from them. So I probably need to just do an old-fashioned phone call. But they sell some really nice products, but they're also made for traceability, and they're also made for people with billions of dollars. So it's kind of a different product. But yeah, I'm familiar with Tonichi. Is that what you said? Because I know they make click wrenches for sure. We used to buy them.
They make digital ones with a controller that can control up to 4 of them and then give no-go signals.
How much is it?
No idea.
Got it. All right, so you got to get a quote, which is means it's a lot of money.
I think somebody found the digital torque wrench side of it for like $1,800 on Amazon.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure that the controller is probably another $2,000 or $3,000 or something like that.
Yeah. See, I think a mid-level step is I've found some Wi-Fi enabled click wrenches, but you're going to have to build your own logic, right? All it does is it communicates.
Right.
To something, whatever that something is. Now you got to build it, and that'd be my last little unsolicited advice to people is like, if you can buy it, please do. Like I am now I'm grateful that I'm in the position now where I have more money than time. That was not the case 3 years ago. Well, I never had time, but I had no money. But if I can buy a solution, I'm going to buy a solution. I don't have any desire to build a homegrown product unless it's with off-the-shelf items that are cheap. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. You're not in the business of developing a torque wrench. You're in the business of making tools.
Yeah, I think the small and not small, but I am probably the last thing I'll say about new fun things is I will be making my own little vacuum holding fixture for my Pearson pallets. I asked Jay if I could buy one from him, and he said it's not on the docket anytime soon. So I'm like, all right, fine. I guess I can't buy it. So, but effectively, what it allowed me to do is securely hold my pallet so that I can just focus, so my team members and myself can focus on just tightening the bolts, not the pallet sliding all over our workbench.
Right. Yeah. You and I had talked about that through DM a couple days ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm just sharing for the public that, do I make some of my own stuff that I don't sell? Yes. But only because I couldn't buy it. But what I did do is I bought one of Jay's vacuum things.
Oh, awesome.
So I'll be using his little vacuum generator to do it. And the reason I really like his is you can buy a vacuum generator, but not with the simplicity of his.
Right. Oh yeah, ours works amazing. I don't
right. But I mean, like the value add is that I can train somebody on how it works in like 2 seconds. Push this button, watch the little red thing go down. That's it.
Right.
And that's the same reason I bought the pallet system. And the first several years, I made good money and made great parts with my Orange Vice system. But if all you're doing is running pallets, it's kind of like the jack of all trades, not the racehorse. And the racehorse is a Pearson pallet. Like you cannot change a pallet any faster than that system.
And is it working out for you guys so far?
It's been great. And the thing that I love is I know that I'm clamped in because I'm probing the pallet. And if it's within 3 thou, then I know I'm good. Because the pallet rises if it's not clamped in.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right? So I can post the stories when we get off the phone. But, the first thing I do on any production program now is we're probing the pallet for Z height to confirm that we're clamped.
That's super cool. I didn't realize that. Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense now that you say it.
So the machine knows, whereas any kind of torque. And so this is where, I've seriously considered fifth axis products for clamping individual parts for sure. And I'm still not going to buy them or anything. But Jay's system is the only one that I'm aware of right now that is super consistent in something that I can check easily. Now, could I go probe an Orange Vice pallet? I could, but the probe isn't strong enough to push it if it's not fully seated. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when the when the Pearson pallet it's all binary. It's either clamped or unclamped. And when it's unclamped, the air is forcing it up.
Right. Yeah. There's a distinct difference between the two.
Or, sorry, not the air.
The balls.
The seal. The seal is actually what's pushing it up.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The ball lock's release, so it's not doing any pushing. It's doing only pushing in one direction, which is down when it's engaged. And people may have seen in my stories, I drilled through one of them, so I learned how to change it out. So it was actually pretty straightforward.
So when you drilled
Super
into
easy.
it, did it lose air pressure, or do you?
No,
Okay.
no, but what it did affect is coolant and tiny thing because it went through the pallet. Any coolant and chips in the pallet were now going into the base. So it was only a matter of time before some tiny stuff was getting stuck in the ball bearings.
Got
So it's starting to stick a little bit. So I changed it out because I just don't need an operator coming to me and being like, "Hey, the base won't unlock." I'd be like, "Oh, great." Now it's a way more expensive endeavor.
it.
But yeah, so I know that was a roundabout research and pallet systems, but yeah, really encourage anyone to reach out anytime, and hopefully it was helpful for somebody other than me just talking your ear off. So
No, well, and I really appreciate you coming on. I definitely learned a lot both about your business and about e-commerce and all that in general. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
yeah, no, happy to be here, and Dylan, I appreciate it. I appreciate all the hard work that you put into to making this happen.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, thanks again. Have a great night.
Hey, I'm not going to let you off that easy.
Oh, go
So
for it.
I'm thinking about this really hard. You only have 50 weeks. So where are you at?
50 weeks
You're
in the year.
you're you're going full time this year, right?
I am. That is the plan.
All right, all right. Well, uh, the countdown has begun. So
I know. I have been consistently reminding myself of that every week. It's good. It's a good to have the pressure on and be much more focused in the business and how we want to structure it. Both Brad and I, we've already started talking about how we want to structure it all. I've started talking with some other people on Instagram who have gone through this, both either the transition or just going cold turkey into it, and how they paid themselves and how they did taxes and the pros and cons to the many different styles of doing all that. So I'm starting to get all my ducks in a row, but it's exciting and nerve wracking all at the same time.
I bet. I'll look forward to chatting about it as you get closer. So
Yeah, definitely.
um,
I'll make sure to pass along all the lessons to the audience that I learned, because there will be many, as I'm coming to discover already.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Are we at the plug social thing? I don't think.
Yeah. Let's plug your social one more
Okay.
time. Where can they find you? Instagram, website, all that stuff.
At DFM Toolworks on Instagram. We do have a YouTube, but it's really not all that useful yet. But if you want to subscribe and then get a random notification, please do. And our website is dfmtoolworks.com. And the only other plug that I wanted to make is we are looking for a setup machinist, but I'm working with a recruiter that's already helped me in the past, and I don't expect a bunch of people in Chicago to be like, oh yeah, I'd love to go work at DFM, but you never know if somebody's made it 2 hours and 15 minutes or whatever, and is interested in applying. Please DM me, and I'll send you the link to where they can apply.
Awesome.
That's it.
Well, thank you again, and thanks everyone for listening. We will see you back next week.